cross? What if we flip the script on this thing a little bit? That every time I say, what if I mess up? Instead I said, what if God shows up? What if instead of saying, what if I don't have what it takes? What if I say, what if God's using this as a setup in the midst of this setback? When I say, what if it's too late? What if instead I say, what if God's doing this just in time? In those moments when I say, what if I'm scared? Instead, what if I said, what if God is doing something wonderful in the midst of this? And I know I can trust him to nurture me and protect me right in the middle of the place where I am. What if we changed our language about the what ifs? What if instead of it being filling us with fear, we allowed it to fill us with trust? What if we asked God to do something big in our life? What if we would shift this in this moment, in this window of time, and allow our what ifs to be something that causes us to trust him more than ever? Hey, thanks for joining us on this Tuesday night. Pastor Lindsay, Pastor Chris, thanks for jumping in. And these are always really kind of special times, whether you're watching this live on Tuesday or you're catching this on demand on Facebook or YouTube. We're really glad you're here. And if this has been something that's been beneficial for you, I hope you'll pass it along and share it with others. I've had really cool conversations just in the last couple of weeks, how people have said how meaningful and helpful these teachings have been. So really appreciate that, and you saying it. Hope you meant it. And but if you'd share it and pass it along with others, that would be awesome. And so we talked a little bit on Sunday. We opened up talking about construction, and we're getting into that season. Yeah. Does it bring out the best in you?
Oh yeah, just the best.
Yeah.
It brings out what's in you. That's for
sure.
sure. Yeah.
You can just leave it there.
Yeah. And, I love it how, like, when you come to one of those zones, that moment where people start jockeying for the only lane that's available,
yes.
and you start to see, like, who's the more aggressive, who's kind of letting people in.
Who's the rule follower that got over 5 miles early.
That's right, and blocked everybody. And you really get to see, like, the old Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, right? You get to see it all right there. Yeah.
So rule follower or competitive, pushing for the right position? Because I don't know which one you are.
Yeah.
Neither does our audience at home.
Problem is I'm letting my secrets out now.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would have to answer. Depends on the day.
Okay.
Like I've got both in me, and it depends where I'm going.
Yeah.
What the kids are doing in the car, and what has happened so far that day.
Yeah. And this is a good segue into our topic. Probably depends on our prayer life, is what I'm guessing, right? And I know it does for me.
It certainly
could be another one.
So we started a new series on Sunday called Building for Blessing, where we were talking about the idea of making sure that in your life you were building in a way so that you could support the blessing and the anointing that God can bring our way. We looked at this principle that comes from the book of Acts, and I won't take too much time to talk about it here. And if you weren't with us on Sunday, you can jump online, Facebook, YouTube, on our website, and catch the message called Building for Blessing from April 11th. But the principle is that when you look at the book of Acts, there's all these supernatural things that happen. But so often, before the supernatural can happen, God has to do something structural in the life of the church. And we'll look at this over the next few weeks, that whether it be through transition, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through character development in our own lives, sometimes through just obedience or even contentment in people's lives, that God's able to build a foundation in our lives that then he can pour out his blessings. Because if we don't have that foundation, we're not going to be able to sustain it. So he often does, and this was the principle from Sunday, we'll use it a lot. God will often do the structural before he does the supernatural. And so we see that. We looked at some principles on Sunday that feed into that. One is that you reap what you sow, and we kind of unpacked that a little bit, and how preparation precedes blessing. I can't copyright that. I really remember 2 sermons very clearly from when I was a kid in high school that my pastor preached, and one of them was that principle, that preparation precedes blessing. And if you want God's blessing in your life, there's times when he catches us off guard and surprises us, but usually it's something that we've invested some time in. And then the third thing that we looked at was you get what you pray for. And I think that's really key. I've learned that in my life too many times. I like a deal, you know, and so why buy the name brand if you can get, you know, the similar thing? And sometimes that's okay. Like I don't need clothes that have all kinds of logos on them, or I don't have, you know, and I can do but like when it comes to things that really matter, you want the thing that has value, not the knockoff, you know, and you're going to get what you pay for. And I found you get what you pray for. And even just when we walked through those 4 weeks of prayer together leading up to Easter, could see and sense and still how God was using that, you know, in our lives and the life of the church. And so, you know, the passage in Luke chapter 11, Jesus spells it out. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be open. Can I let you in on a little inside secret? This is kind of fun. That passage, like whenever I have the chance to read that every so often in a message, because it's kind of iconic, you know, when I get to the knock, I always do. And if you're in the service and we get to that verse, if I do this, watch around you, because it'll wake people up every time. Like you always get that little knock will cause somebody
It's
to
unexpected.
It brings them back. Yeah.
Draws them back in.
Reels them in, you know. And I think it's a bad dream, but that whole principle, just prayer matters. And I want to talk a little bit about why that's, you know, so important in our lives today. You can think of prayer as a part of that infrastructure that allows you to be in a place where God can then build on that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that idea of infrastructure is really, it's timely, but it's also like a real important thing to think about, because, you know, it's so much more fun to look at what's above ground than it is what's below. You know, that's where all the fun stuff looks like it happens, but it can't happen unless the infrastructure can support it. And
you can't build a house without the foundation being laid. And no one wants to go look at the hole in the ground. You want the walls up. But really, if you don't have that hole in the ground built correctly, your walls will never stand.
They're gonna fall. Yeah. And we you know, when I did a bunch of engineering work, that whole concept of infrastructure just, you know, resonates with me, because I did a lot of projects over the years in the refinery. I either worked on them or I led them or whatever, and we would do projects, but none of us. There were people that were a lot smarter than we were, and had things that we needed. So we would go like to other engineering firms, or we would go to technology firms, and we would, you know, they would market their stuff, whatever that was, and then we would buy that, so that we could take advantage of it. We knew we wanted it, we just didn't know everything about it. We didn't know how it all worked, right? And so what I could have done is I could have went to that company and said, hey, I want this, but I don't really want to talk to you. I just want that. Give me that, I'll buy it and bring it into the refinery, and it's ours now, and we're all set. But if I would have done that, like the people that I reported to would have said, and you need to go. You need to leave now, because they knew that wasn't the right answer. What you do with that is, if you buy that technology, then what you do is you talk to them, because they're the designer of it. Like, they've seen what works, they've seen the problems with it. They can give you like these all helpful hints and shortcuts and all this stuff to make it the most successful project that you've ever done. But I'd never get that if I didn't talk with the designer. And I think that, you know, there's times I can remember in some of our bigger projects, really some of the big ones, where we didn't want to spend the money for something, or we didn't want to take the time to do something, but they were telling us, you need to do this. You don't want to hear it, but you need to do this. This is going to cost you time, money, whatever it is. But I'm telling you, if you want to be successful, you need to do it. And then we'd go, okay, we'll finally do it, right? And usually I'd have to go talk to the boss about more money, is usually what that meant. And so, but it was because I listened to the designer, even if he was saying, he or she were saying things that I didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think our lives are the same way. Like, I think we need to talk to the designer of our lives. We need the big D, not the little d, but the big designer, right?
Yeah.
This person, this God that made us, formed us, we're in His image. He knows the big picture that I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, even an hour from now, let alone next year, next, whatever.
Yeah.
He knows all of it. He's got the perspective. And so why wouldn't I want to talk to the designer and get his mind and his input, even if I don't want to hear it?
Yeah.
Even if it's something that he says, I think you need to do this. I don't want to do that. But he's got the best angle at it that I don't. And so I just, when I think about prayer, I think about it like talking to the designer. Like, why wouldn't I want to get as close to the person that knows how he's the person that created the first human being. Before they fell, none of us have ever experienced, right? Why wouldn't I want to talk to that person? And what's even more amazing is he wants to talk to us. And so why wouldn't I? And so I love this idea of prayer as infrastructure because it just resonates with me like that,
Well, and you'll watch, like, as we go through these stories, every one of them, like the big three we looked at in Acts, leading up to Pentecost, the conflict with the widows, what happens at the Council of Jerusalem, every one of them has a sense of, hey, we were praying, or hey, when we prayed, or we sensed the designer said this was good. It seemed right to the Holy Spirit and to us. So when you see that, you realize just kind of how important all of this is, And I think, you watch this. I mean, we've had these conversations. You can tell, as in children's ministry, when a child has a healthy communication relationship with a parent and when they don't, and the difference that makes in a life, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You can see that in the children, but yet isn't that how we are as adults? And even some of the relationships we have here on earth, we still have that. But when we don't have a healthy relationship and we aren't going to our ultimate designer, it affects every aspect of our life here.
Yeah,
that's good.
It's so key. So let's talk about how we develop the practice of prayer. And Pastor Chris, you've helped us by maybe putting some thoughts together. So I'll throw them out, and we can kind of walk through them. If you're going to develop a practice for prayer, here's the first thing we encourage you to do. Number one, we need a strategy, and we talked about this a little bit on Sunday. Maybe we can break it down a little bit. I still remember Mrs. Frank's 4th grade elementary school. If you're going to write something, you have to answer the questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. She's also the one that told me I was a bad influence on this other kid, and
I was about to thank Mrs.
I'm
Frank,
a little
but
bit,
I'll
no. Who, what, when, where, why, and how.
He had the who and the what. Okay.
God bless you. And so like with that in mind, then, like, how do we apply those different thoughts? So I don't know, your thoughts. How do you develop a strategy for prayer in your life?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I have to be intentional with it, because you know how things go. Like, if you don't make up, if I don't make a plan to do, maybe it's the engineer. If I don't make a plan, I'm the one that plans when to get over in the lane, right? So, but if I don't make if I don't make a plan, so what I've incorporate in my life, and this is really what I do. So if you ever stop by my home at 6 a.m, I probably won't answer the door. It's not because I'm asleep. Hopefully, I'm in the basement. That's where I'm at, and so I take that time, and I've done that for a long time. But I'm intentional about it. So now it's more of a routine, even though it's not boring. It's a routine, so it's a natural thing for me to do. But I think it's important to make a plan and kind of set aside a place and a time, to get the when and the where kind of nailed down. If I leave it to chance, chances are I won't do it. That's the way that works for me.
And go ahead. I was gonna.
Well, I agree. Like, because I have you have your intentions and you have your plans. And I know that I'm wired where I have to be both intentional and unintentional.
Yeah.
Because my intentional time with God is amazing, but it also leads me to remembering, hey, when circumstances arise throughout the day, instead of me controlling it or instead of me putting blame on someone else, like, I have to have those unintentional prayers and that ongoing conversation also throughout the day. Like, I think sometimes we get stuck in routines, which are great, but it's also remembering that this is an ongoing relationship
Yeah.
all day long in a conversation you can have. And that's what we
That's
teach in
great.
children's ministry. Like, it's not specific words, it's literally a conversation that you get to have with God, and an amazing opportunity that we get to do that every day.
I love that.
Well, I think that's the balance of it, right? Because on the one hand, I want to be intentional, and say, hey, I'm going to choose to pray. Jesus taught us how to pray, that kind of thing. On the flip side of that, you've got, just the whole idea that doesn't always happen, right? Like something's going to happen with the dog, or something's going to happen with the kids, or I've got this early morning appointment, or I've got these things that are going to throw that off. And then there's just, I can speak honestly, like just watching the different seasons of life. I can remember the big difference between when our kids were in school and then when summer hit, and how that changed the schedule. And those different times, it fits. I remember we had one year where our kids went in shifts, and it was like, the older kids were out the door and gone about an hour before the youngest had to get up. And so I had this sweet window every day that I just knew there's a moment to breathe here. And I don't know, that was probably the most consistent that I've ever, and then that summer hit, and and I've never recovered, not necessarily, but I mean, then you got to go, okay, I got to refine these routines in different moments. And so the one is the intentional commitment to go, okay, how do I do that? And know that some seasons may be more difficult than the others, but then also the unintentional of, what's 1 Thessalonians 5:17 just says, pray continually, like of keeping that, kind of going in that dialogue, that conversation going, all the time is a healthy thing.
Because Pastor Chris at 6 a.m. is very intentional. But if you come to my house at the 6 a.m. hour, we're chucking breakfast at kids, and if you do knock on the door, I'm going to give you a child. Like, there's just a difference during that.
And then you'll really pray.
Yeah. But that wouldn't be set up in the same way. But just because Pastor Chris has that time frame of 6 a.m. doesn't mean it works for me now.
That's right.
But that's the best part about it, is that it's unique and it's an experience for you.
Yeah.
And that's where, I've watched, I've never been a young mom, but I've watched and had conversations, especially with young moms who have said, I hear you talk about reading God's word, and I hear you talk about this, and you just got to get the nature of my life and and go, I get it. And God, I don't think God, judges in those different seasons. He just wants to know that we're doing the best we can in those different places to find those connections in all those different ways.
But you can also be creative. Like,
Okay.
if you get in the car, I'm in the car now, right? So I'm driving, but there are times where I'm the only one in the car, which is great for being able to listen to devotions, or being able to turn off the radio and just have a time. And yes, I'm driving and I'm doing something else, but like, that's also a good intentional time. I have to get creative with my time as someone that's a young mom with busy kids. But if I don't, then my kids and my husband and everything else suffer. So while I'm busy because I have so much, I also have to know that there has to be a time, because everything else is affected if there's not.
Okay, so let's come back to two things there. One, we have more resources now than ever
Yes.
to be able to do those things.
Yes.
So, like I said on Sunday, what if you read one chapter of the book of Proverbs every day to get some wisdom? Well, the reality is, you go, well, I don't have that time, but maybe I could listen to it in the car. It used to be, man, I'd have to buy the CDs, and I'd have to, and this is from, back in the Stone Age, and Chatosaurus Rex here, just,
Some more.
but now, like, you just go to the Bible app, that's all free.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's like that, you've got it. Like, you can download podcasts or devotions or sermons at littlecalvary.org. Like, I mean, you can do all those things, those resources that are there. But then the other side of that is, when I do that, I'm better for my family.
Oh, yeah.
Even if I just grab those few moments,
Absolutely.
that shore that up. I remember hearing somebody saying when I was in college, unless your input exceeds your output, the upkeep will be your downfall. And that's just always struck me, which then I guess goes to the second thing for us to talk about, is to remember that prayer is a conversation with God. We can make it out to be a checklist or a must do, but it's, at the end of the day, it's a conversation.
Yeah, it's. I think it's easy to think about. God is a whole nother being, right? He's above us and all of that, right? And so it's easy to get into this mindset where, like, I don't know how to talk to God.
Yeah.
But,
Or I'm not good enough.
or I'm not good enough,
Like all
or
those
I don't have the right language, or you know, we break out the King James version and we start there, you know, and it's really, I love how Jesus described his relationship with his disciples, especially like in the back part of John. It transitions where he says, "I don't call you, you know, disciples or servants anymore. I call you friends." And he transitions to that friend thing. And that was one of the things that people accused Jesus of being, was a friend of sinners, right? And so he is more of a friend. And so how would I talk to a friend? I wouldn't like try to craft some flowery language. I can remember one time, we in a small group at our house, I think it was when we were doing young adults, we had a young adult that was, you know, kind of struggling with his relationship with the Lord, and a lot of things had happened in his life, and he's, you know, kind of, God began doing some work in his life. And one time we were in our small group, and it was time to pray, and I would usually just ask people to pray, and I'd never put them on the spot, but this person decided this was his time to kind of step out. And it was one of the coolest things, because he just spoke in almost slang. It was just slang terms, you know, like, "Hey man, thanks for being here," you know, that kind of thing. And it was the coolest thing, because I thought that's exactly what God would want us to do. Just talk to him. And then I think he wants to talk to us in the same way, you know, maybe not an audible voice, maybe, but more like you would a friend, like you would try to steer them in a certain direction, or you would you know, try to direct them and maybe leave a thought in their mind or something like that. I think God wants to do that with us if we listen. And I think the other thing that maybe is really important when it comes to this idea of conversation is, I've had friends that would say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you speak, you know. Maybe you just said that to me, though. I think it was probably.
Might want to write that one down.
Yeah. But I think there's a aspect of that conversation with God that we often don't think about with prayer. It's like, okay, what do I say to God? What's my list? How do I get this all in the 5 minutes I have, or whatever? When in reality, maybe I just need to be still before him and say, God, I want to hear from you. Just speak to my heart. And I think that's what happened in Acts 13. Like when, if you know, remember the story, Paul and Barnabas were in Antioch, and they were kind of just praying, like, what's next? I don't think probably they knew what was next. And they were praying, worshiping, and fasting. That's what the scriptures talks about. And that was the moment that God spoke to them and said, hey, Paul and Barnabas, you go do what I've called you to do. And they sent them out. But it was that listening moment, right, that kind of created that place. So I think that's such a key thought when we think about prayer is that listening. How does God want to speak to me, and what does he want to say?
That's good.
So
when you have like mentors and you talk to I can think of like, you know, conversations you have with the people who are breathing life into you. You don't remember every single word that they said to you, but you walk away remembering segments of it, or the theme of it, or the what can I change in my life. But that is what happens, you're right, when we're listening and when we're willing to have a two-way conversation. And I am a list person and type A, and it is okay.
yeah,
But it's also okay to be still and listen, because that's how I'm going to change. Like when we look at prayer and we look at even the other reason, my heart needs to be changed and my life needs to be changed. And I do need to watch how I react even in construction zones. But it all comes out in that way. So I do think that's the same ways. Yeah, we absolutely need to be listening.
My prayer has transitioned kind of recently, I'm ashamed to say, really, that I would often pray, Lord, you know what I have on my calendar today. You know what needs to happen. Would you help me to get this done? And I really got convicted recently about that. Like, am I on my agenda or his?
Yeah.
Like, so I've transitioned my prayer recently to be, Lord, what's your agenda today? Help my agenda to match that. And if something's on mine that doesn't fit, then help me know that
Yeah.
and move that off or transition that somehow. And I feel like that, for me at least, was a bit of a step that I needed to make, because it's so easy to get locked in to what you think you need to do
Yeah.
and not even really listen to what God might have to say about that.
I had a friend in college who would blow in my dorm room and, hey, this is what happened with my day, and this is what happened in class, this is what's going on with my girlfriend, and this is this and this, and this is what I need from you, and hey, can I borrow your, and what do you think about, do you want to go to blah, 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 and then be gone. And I can remember sitting on my bed and thinking, I'm doing great, thanks for asking. He's gone, and never once said a word about, hey dude, what's going on in your life, or even stopping long enough to really even let me comment on the things that he was saying and being ticked.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you're my friend, because if you weren't my friend, I'd be ticked at you. I'd think you were a jerk, And then realizing that's what I do to God.
Yeah.
I often just kind of blow into his house and tell him what I want from him and what's going on with me, but I don't give him a chance to talk or even find out what's in his heart, And so, which I think then leads to the third thing, prayer is more about changing your heart than it is about getting something from God. And that one, prayer is more about changing your heart than it is about getting something from God. I typically come to prayer with, all right, Lord, meet my needs more than, God, what do you have for me? Like you were just mentioning. James 4:3 says, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. When my focus is here, I think so many times I miss, what God wants to do in the big picture.
Yeah, I think I ask wrong.
Yeah.
I just ask it, I just blurt it out, right? And it's just wrong. I may not even think I have wrong motives there. Like they could be good things.
Right. Or
Right?
things that need prayer.
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
need them.
Yeah.
But when you're only willing to say what you want from him and are unwilling to accept what he wants from your life, then you're the one missing out. But yeah, that's right. It's your life that's not changed. Or I can't even think of it, maybe it's someone else's. Because even when we think about talking and changing hearts, a lot of times it's in those moments that someone's laid on my heart to call or text, or my heart to plug into their lives. And if I didn't take that time to change or to pray or to listen, then I can't impact their life.
Yeah.
There's been several times in the last couple of years, and you guys know this because it's your fault, right? Several times in the last couple, you don't even know where I'm going, but I'm glad to blame you. But where I've walked into some kind of a meeting, staff meeting or planning meeting or something, and I already know this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to do it on this date, or we're going to do it in this way or whatever. And it's just become a joke a little bit in my mind, I come in and go, okay, we're going to do this, but I'll tell you the one thing we're not going to do is this. And then we have a team conversation, and the thing we end up doing is the one thing I said don't. I remember when we were planning an event last summer, how we were going to do something, and I said, guys, we're going to do it, but I can tell you, this date is sacred. We won't do this date. And by the end of the meeting, it's that's the only date that works, and it has so much. And
Yeah, we need you to stop doing that.
well, you guys keep getting your way, so I don't know what you're crying about, But the thing that's cool about that is I'm so sure, but I'm so glad to have relationships where we can interact and listen to one another and then pull that away. Yeah. Well, the same thing is so often with prayer, because I'll be like, God, this is how it should be, or I think this is the way the answer needs to come, or whatever. And God will help me to see it's about the state of my heart more than it is whether I get what I want out of that prayer. The other thing I've learned is the longer I hold on to what I want, the longer it seems to take for God to do what he wants.
Absolutely.
And
That's so true, isn't it? And I think God's just so much more concerned with our character and who we are and what's going on in our life than he is about anything that I might ask for. And that doesn't mean the things I'm asking for are wrong necessarily. Maybe he wants that, but he knows if I have it now, whatever the it is, that it might be a bad move for my character. Or it might cause me to be distracted from something he really has here, and maybe that's a later thing.
Or I'm not ready for it.
Or I'm not ready.
I often think I'm ready for it,
Yeah.
and then realize, oh,
Yeah.
my foundation was definitely not okay, and
Yeah.
that's why that was your timing and not mine.
That's a great segue because in 3 weeks we're going to talk about character, and so yeah, that's a really good transition.
Yeah.
So here's I guess my big takeaway for myself, but then I think for others too. Like don't psych yourself out with prayer.
Yeah.
Like I know so many times in my own life and with other people, I get psyched out because I think that prayer is either performance, like that I have to get it right, or that it's like this art.
Yeah.
And I do think there's truths to that. Like you want to pray in ways when you're praying with somebody else that speaks words of life and encouragement and let the Spirit use you. And I think you do want to become a more proficient and a better prayer, but it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And in the same way that I want to get to know you better so that I can have meaningful
Yeah.
conversations, same thing with God. And at some point you just got to start.
Yep.
And so if you have a developed routine of prayer, I hope this is an encouragement for you to dig in deeper. And if you don't, turn this off and start. Like let this be a motivator to just spend some simple time and saying, God, I'm ready to have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
So, guys, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
I just think, for me, it helps me to remember that one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Romans 5:8, where God, it reminds me every time I read it that before I even knew I needed God, and while I was still as far away as I could possibly be, He loved me and did this for me. And so He's like just wanting to hear from us, like giddy to hear from us. So we don't have to worry about if you haven't prayed for 6 months or 6 years or 60 years, that next conversation is the one He wants to have. So He is just waiting for that conversation.
We were joking about our phones before we started the recording, and people we know who aren't real quick to answer those texts or that kind of thing. But even then, I'm glad when you do finally respond, right? I wasn't looking at you, but like when someone does finally respond. So if God's been speaking to your heart about talking with Him, shoot Him a text, and it'd be a good thing. So, guys, thank you again. If this has been helpful, share it and pass it along. Whether you do that by social media or just encourage somebody to check it out, that would be great. I'm going to give you just a little teaser. You do not want to miss this Sunday. It's going to be really special. Whether you're joining us online or in person, it's going to be a really, really special Sunday, so you're not going to want to miss it. And I'll just leave it at that. So thanks for joining us. God bless. Have a great day. We'll see you Sunday.